I read all 5 bonus chapters from A House of Flame and Shadow, so you don't have to. Now, I already had the Barnes & Noble edition and Audible, which didn't have any bonus chapters, so thank you to all of the lovely people out there who let us read the rest of them on Reddit. These bonus chapters happen at different points in the story, so we get one from before we even begin Crescent City, and then we also had a couple from after House of Flame and Shadows, and then a couple that were during this story. If you're here wondering whether or not you should read the chapters, I think it depends on how you feel about things like novellas. If you read A Court of Frost and Starlight, the little novella that came after A Court of War and Ruin, and you really enjoyed that, and you just liked hanging out with the characters even though there wasn't a ton of plot or necessarily things you needed to know, then the bonus chapters are great. I feel like you don't necessarily need to read them to better understand the story. They're just like a fun time to be around the characters that we love. So if you don't want to be spoiled for any of the chapters, it is your time to exit. If you're fine with being spoiled and you just want to know what happens, feel free to stick around. So the first bonus scene I read was the one in the back of my physical copy, which is the Barnes & Noble edition one, and it follows Bryce and Hunt sort of immediately following House of Flame and Shadows. We might be a couple weeks, maybe a month out. We are at Bryce's mom's house decorating for Solstice. Bryce is setting up like a garland, and her idea is to like hot glue little baby figurines to the garland. For some reason, that is Ember's hobby of choice, is to make little baby figurines, like a baby and a thing of lettuce. Like, it's just so random. But Hunt does not like them. They kind of freak him out. And he's like, your mom and everyone else at this Solstice gathering is gonna hate the fact that you glued babies on here. So after she gets the first one, she doesn't do any more, but she's like, oh, it'll be a fun surprise. We get a note that everyone is conserving First Light because they have not figured out how to handle not having First Light. They're running pretty low on it, and they still haven't figured out how to electronically power their lives without it yet. So they have this candlelit service situation, and luckily the priestess thought that the baby glued to the garland was actually funny. And I love the little asides that we get because Bryce like kind of shoots Hunt a look to say like, I told you so. And he sticks his tongue out at her, and she's like, the Umbra Mortis, folks. In like the next scene of this story, Ember's friend comes over for brunch and she's like drooling over Hunt. It's just really funny to see him get uncomfortable in situations after we've seen him like handle war. And it's like the things that scare him are little baby figurines and this random old lady, and then Bryce's own mother he's like low-key scared of. For Solstice, Ember gets him a book about pottery with a note that's like, to better appreciate your mother-in-law's craft, which I thought was hilarious. And Bryce's present is a little clay baby that looks like Hunt. It was so funny. She had her mom make it, and Hunt's just like, oh, please, like, don't. And she's chasing him around like, I'm the Umbra Mortis. It was just a nice little Christmassy scene. The Danica and Bryce scene, I feel like, had the most weight to it. It is happening before the very first Crescent City book. Danica's obviously still alive. Bryce notices something's up. She comes home from work, and Danica is already like smoking and drinking, and she wants to go out. And that's like fairly normal for them. Like they like to go out, but Bryce notices that there's something kind of in Danica's face that is just really unsettled. And so now we know a little bit more of what that is, but at the time Bryce like just doesn't really think anything of it. She's like, oh, like I should go out with her. Like there's something more than just Sabine getting to her. They get stopped by a couple of their packmates who are like on patrol that night, and they're like, being drunk and disorderly in public is illegal. And they're just kind of joking about it, but Connor's there and he gives Bryce like this weird look, like he's kind of disappointed in her. And I didn't love that. I was like, we should just sort of leave Connor's character alone. They had like sort of a weird romance thing, but I don't want like that kind of sour taste in my mouth from him personally. I just thought it was kind of weird for him to be like that. This is also the night that Bryce gets the tattoo. So with the horn in it. And they go to this tattoo studio, and Bryce is sort of immediately clocking that they've had tons and tons of drinks, and Danica is almost acting sober, which is weird. And Danica gives the tattoo artist like this powder to add to it. She says it's just some sort of, it's like a wolf thing, like a traditional thing for them. And Bryce doesn't really question it because she doesn't ever really question Danica because theoretically they're so close. But reading this, I was kind of upset. Like, I really enjoyed Danica's character in Crescent City sort of before we knew everything, but now that we know more about Danica, I didn't love this scene because I was like, she's being so manipulative. Like, it is, I just feel like it's so wrong to get your best friend crazy drunk, convince her to go get a tattoo, put the horn in it, and she has no idea about any of it. And obviously Bryce means a lot to Danica. Danica's tearing up, she's talking about how much she loves her, but I was like, this is not how you treat your best friend. It was unsettling to me too. Like, seeing some of these characters, I was like, maybe we should have left a couple of these people alone because this didn't really endear me to Danica at all. And maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe that wasn't the purpose of this scene, just to see what happened, but I just didn't love how that turned out and how Danica manipulated her. And thinking back on it, like, I just don't understand why Danica would have done this, because at the end of House of Sky and Breath, or towards the end, we sort of get an idea that Danica had put everything in place for Bryce. It seems like Bryce was always part of the plan, and I'm like, why was she always part of the plan? Bryce obviously is very strong in herself, but she's not a warrior. Like, she didn't train for that, and she didn't necessarily have the skills. Like, there are a lot of moments where Bryce sort of gets by on being scrappy and being lucky. Maybe that's what Danica was counting on, but it just seemed really weird that Danica would have set her up for such a big job without ever consulting her. And by getting the horn tattooed into her back, she was just sort of locking it into place that Bryce was going to have to be a big part of this rebellion and getting rid of the Asteri without her knowledge. And it just didn't sit well with me. The third bonus scene is Ember and Randal, so Bryce's parents, when they get dropped off to be babysat by Nesta while Bryce goes and saves the world. First of all, why was it taking Rhysand so long to get there? In the background, we see like this storm coming that's full of stars, and I'm just like, Rhysand doesn't just like, and he's there? Is that not how this works anymore? It just seemed like such a different way of traveling. Or maybe it's just something we haven't seen before, but we get several moments of Ember being like, I can see what's brewing outside. And I'm like, why is it taking so long? I love Ember thinking that Azriel has dragon wings because, yeah, it's hard to, we call them the Bat Boys, but like, it is dragon wing material. Rhysand shows up, and obviously Bryce is intimidated. We have all three of the Bat Boys there. We've all got these big wings. Amren's there, who's obviously scary in her own right. But the thing is that Rhysand is being so mean. Like, it didn't feel like his character at all. I guess we're kind of supposed to see this side of him where he gets defensive over his world and over what he's built and stuff. And so I understand why he's upset. It just, I don't know, maybe it's been too long since I've read the book. It just didn't feel like the way Rhysand would handle things. Like, coming in and blowing up. Obviously, he and Nesta have some issues between them, but the way that Nesta seemed to actually realize, like, Rhysand might kill her, it didn't sit right. Like, it just felt weird. And it was for giving the mask away. And I just feel like giving the mask to Bryce is something Rhysand might have done himself, like understanding how it could help. And he would never turn Ember away to take care of her if he knew that they were in danger. It just seemed very, I don't know, a little cold of him to react the way that he did when I don't really see him as a cold person. Ember also is very upset for good reasons. Like, her daughter has gone to save the world and she has left her there. And obviously Ember is fully human, but I feel like Ember felt pretty slighted by that and upset, first of all, that they didn't bring Cooper. Cooper is her pretty much adopted son. And when Rhysand is talking about going and getting Bryce, or like that they should have killed Bryce, Ember's like, don't worry, when I see my daughter, I will be obliterating her, which I thought was funny because Ember is quite sassy. The thing is that Ember somehow got the idea that Bryce used them as a bargaining chip. Now, I know that they don't understand the language there, and they do end up taking, you know, the beans that help them understand the language, but I just didn't understand how she could think Bryce used them as a trade for the mask. Like, sorry, but what purpose would they have served in that world that would have been a trade? Like, it just didn't make sense. Like, I feel like Ember should have realized my daughter left us here to protect us, and she would be pissed about that. Not necessarily thinking like, I can't believe my daughter traded me away. Like, it just didn't, I don't know. It felt weird. What I did love is when Rhysand is about to like lay into Nesta and yell at her, and Ember sticks up for her, and she knows like obviously she's going up against these very powerful fae, to the point like so powerful that she realizes that the Autumn King looks like a child in comparison to their power, and she still lets him have it for talking to Nesta like that, and she really sticks up for her. And so I think that was nice to be able to see how she and Nesta got so close in such a short amount of time before Bryce came and picked her up. And it's really because she was a mama bear for Nesta in a way that she had never experienced before. The Ruhn and Lydia story, obviously, I think a lot of us have come to the recognition that Lydia carried the third book. Like, she was the best character in there. And so it was really nice to kind of see her again and get to see her relax a little bit. She and Ruhn are trying to decorate their new apartment together, and Bryce sends them to this art gallery, which was so funny because all of the art is these cats. There's like a cat holding a dead mouse, and there's a cat who's throwing up Midgard. Like, it was supposed to be this artsy thing, but it was just so ridiculous to think of them hanging stuff like that in there. Ruhn gets a call from Deck to like come help them with something, and he's like, literally, it is my day off, like, do not bother me. And they say that they can't get Bryce and Ruhn because they're underwater talking to the Ocean Queen, and so they're on their way to go help them. And we get a note because, okay, when I read the first scene with Bryce and Hunt and they were like, oh, we're all conserving first light, everyone's conserving, I was like, there's no way everyone's conserving that. There are some people out there who are not gonna do that. It's just the way it works. There are gonna be people who don't do it. And we get these people who are called first light deniers. They're not necessarily just selfishly using all the power, which I thought there would definitely be people like that too, that would just use up all the power that they could before it goes out. But these people literally think that Lydia, Ruhn, and all the rest of them are lying about the fact that all the lights are going to go out, all the phones aren't going to work, like there's going to be no more cars eventually because they're just going to run out of all the things that they need to power them. So I was wondering about that because I was like, there's no way the entirety of Midgard is just conserving like crazy. So it was interesting to see that kind of side of the story of these people who just don't believe them. And still in this story, we don't have any inkling of how we're going to replace the electricity. So maybe that's what we get in book 4. Lydia stops Ruhn and tells him that she wants to marry him. And obviously he's super excited about this. Like, this is what he wants. It was a very sweet moment. It was lovely. And then it turns out that there was no problem. Deck was calling him to bring him to this garden where they'd set up the marriage. So like, as soon as he said yes, she's like, oh, by the way, here's our wedding. It was a smaller party. It was perfect for them. Like, it was very sweet. And Lydia's sons were there, which was nice. And it was hilarious because Ruhn's like, I can't believe you put this all together. And Lydia's like, I coordinated a hit on the spine. Coordinating a wedding was nothing. The last one was definitely my favorite, or at least the last one I read. I know they're in different books or whatever. But this one with Bryce, Nesta, and Azriel while they're in the underground tunnels pretty early on in A House of Flame and Shadow. Bryce is trying to sleep and she can't sleep. And she opens her eyes and she sees Azriel staring at her. She jumps back, hits her head on a rock. It's like, it's very funny. And I was like, oh, this is fitting. This really felt like the characters. She asks Azriel and Nesta like how they met, because they clearly, they haven't known each other for life. And they said that they met because of a war. And when Bryce asked like, how did that happen? Did, this King of Hybern declare war on everyone or just you two? And Nesta's like, yes, the King of Hybern declared war on just me and Azriel. I loved the sass. They begin talking about music, which is obviously like a big thing for Nesta because she loves to dance, and Bryce has all these songs on her phone, and so she starts to play different genres for Nesta because they obviously don't have as much music in the ACOTAR world. When she puts on classical music, Azriel's like, oh, that sounds more like what we have in our world. And it was funny because Nesta shushed him and she wanted to listen to more. And Bryce was really sweet. She let her phone basically die in this other world so that Nesta could listen to more of the music. Azriel tends to like death metal, apparently, which was funny because Bryce thinks, oh, if he likes this, he's probably gonna get along well with my brother. They talk a little bit about the tech and what works with tech and what doesn't, because she brought a gun and they'd never seen a gun before, and she's describing guns and bombs and stuff like that, and she was like, oh, well, You know, like even if we didn't have electricity, we probably would have those things. And Azriel says something about how bad people will find a way to be bad in any, you know, realm with whatever they have. And Bryce is like, don't tell me you're like a do-gooder. And Azriel says, you can do good while still being bad. And it's so funny because Bryce is like, I know a million guys who would not be able to say that with the level of cool that you just said it. And then as they're walking, she asks them, you know, like, what other songs do you want to listen to? What genre was your favorite? And Azriel specifically asks for pretty much club music. And that's where, if you've seen the joke on TikTok already, everyone's calling Azriel a club rat. But I was like, he kind of is though, because they go to Rita's all the time. Azriel goes with them to Rita's where they go dancing. And it led me to the question of like, what are they playing at Rita's? Because I can't imagine that they're just playing classical music. That does not seem to be the vibe. And Azriel like continues humming the songs after the phone dies. It was very cute. Like, this was more of what I wanted to see in the book. Like, I wanted to see their worlds colliding harder. Like, I wanted them to, like, share things about their worlds and stuff. And I feel like this was a nice fill-in-the-gap moment for those of us who didn't get quite enough of that in the book. So that is all 5 scenes. If you read them all, please let me know which one was your favorite in the comments and why, like what you liked about it or what you wanted to see that maybe didn't pop up in the bonus chapters. I still thought that maybe we'd get some Aelin in the bonus chapters, maybe just have her somehow seeing our characters from this book, but still no. Maybe next time. Please like this video if you liked it, click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn, thanks for watching. Bye!